In this fourth video on combat mission tactics, I will provide an example of how to set up a fixed defense using combat mission Commonwealth Forces. In this scenario, a German company is in fixed defensive positions, awaiting a British attack. A study of the briefing indicates that the British will be attacking with a strong force of armor and infantry supported by abundant artillery. The Germans have had time to prepare the battlefield and have in place obstacles and mines. The scenario places limits on the player on where the obstacles and units can be set up. One platoon is positioned forward in an outpost line, while the remaining troops in the main line of resistance are further back in the village. This is a good way to set up a defense, particularly when the enemy has many artillery assets. The outpost line will force the enemy to deploy and often expend much of their artillery fire on this thin line of troops. In order to set up a successful defense, you must be thoroughly familiar with the terrain. As usual, I begin my analysis by using a COCA. You begin your planning by imagining how the enemy will probably attack you, and then you design a defense to prevent them from penetrating your positions and seizing the objective. During this process, I move the camera down to eye level and walk the camera around the battlefield, taking note at how the battlefield looks both from the defender's and the attacker's point of view. This is the same approach I used when I was an infantry company commander. The process is time consuming. It often takes me several hours to set up a prepared defense. The key terrain is the objective of the town. Looking over the terrain and thinking about how an armor-heavy force will attack, I can easily see that due to the natural obstacles formed by the hedgerows and buildings and walls on the outskirts of town, that the road entering from the northeast corner of the map and branching into two provides the best avenue approach for the attacker. Between these roads is an open area with few obstacles where the British tanks can fan out and attack towards the town. German engineers have emplaced anti-tank mines and hedgehog obstacles on the right fork of the road, supplementing the natural barriers formed by the hedgerows and effectively denying this avenue of approach to the British. Another possible avenue of approach is on the German right through a farm. Though initially difficult for armor to negotiate, once on the other side, the area opens up and allows them a good avenue paralleling the paved road into the town from the east. The town itself presents a significant obstacle to the attackers, with a large church in the center that offers excellent fields of fire and observation and good cover and concealment. The town is filled with masonry buildings with high connecting walls that will prevent armored vehicles from maneuvering while channeling infantry attacks into potential kill zones. Defending the town, we have one weak German infantry company supported by a heavy machine gun platoon and one anti-tank gun. We are required to set up one platoon forward of the town in what will be outpost positions, and the remainder of the infantry company and the machine gun platoon will be positioned in and around the town. I start setting up the defense by positioning the obstacles. Again, you are somewhat constrained about where some of the mines and other obstacles can be set up. This is realistic. Often as a company commander, you would find that engineers would emplace obstacles in your sector in conformance with higher headquarters defensive scheme. On the left, I shift some of the anti-tank mines and hedgehogs to ensure that I have completely obstructed the road leading around to my left. This way I can position just a few troops to overwatch the obstacles to ensure that the enemy does not slip around this flank. On the right, in the outpost zone, I shift my anti-personnel mines around to inhibit the infantry movement through and around the farm. I also deploy them in support of the recon team in the farmhouse by the road. I locate a couple of free anti-tank mines and put them at key road junctions on the main road into town along with the hedgehogs. In the town itself, I position hedgehogs to supplement the walls and buildings to block the roads into town, forcing the enemy to go around the obstacles or use engineers to blast their way through, slowing their advance. After the obstacles are positioned, I begin placing my troops with an eye towards covering the obstacles with observation and fire. I always begin by placing my heavy weapons first. In this case, I have one anti-tank gun. I can imagine the British tanks will, at some point, approach the road junction to the right of the church, so I position a gun to cover that junction, but far enough back from the front to be both concealed and somewhat protected from infantry and artillery attack. I then position my machine guns. As much as possible, I want to give them the best fields of fire without being too exposed. Ideally, weapons will have cover to their front and fields of fire to the flank. This way, they are not easily suppressed or destroyed by direct enemy fire. They are positioned in the mutually supporting positions of interlocking fire. I want to have my entire defensive perimeter covered by machine gun fire. I place 2 teams in the church. Positioning them there is a trade-off, for though they have excellent fields of fire, they are exposed. This is somewhat mitigated by the protection provided by the stone church. The key to their successful employment will be judging the correct moment to open fire and thus reveal their positions to the enemy. When placing the machine gun teams, I also position their leaders close enough to ensure that they are in communication. Your troops are much more effective and maintain their fighting spirit if under the control of a leader. I place my mortar platoon leader high in the church, but not on the same floor as the machine gun team. My only indirect fire support are my mortars, and the platoon leader has the best communications link with them. Therefore, I will get the fastest response time from them, so I want to make sure that he is positioned to best observe the enemy's approach and attack. Next, I position the platoon that is in the outpost line. I put positions on the right to cover the exits from the farm complex, for I'm worried that the enemy will try to move through that area and attack the town on the right flank. I position the other teams to cover the key road junctions to ensure that the enemy cannot advance without being detected, and if possible, that they would be able to ambush them with handheld anti-tank weapons. When positioning the remaining 2 platoons that will form the main line of resistance, I keep most of my troops back from the edge of the town. I don't want the British armor to be able to pound my positions from afar, but I want them to have to come in close, with their infantry first, where I can ambush them with our infantry weapons. And if the enemy armor advances unsupported, we can ambush them with our anti-tank weapons. The idea is to envision where the enemy will attack, then set up kill zones, where you can momentarily surprise them by firing first, thus gaining immediate fire superiority and killing them. If you can use obstacles to channel them into your kill zones, that is preferable. Carefully analyze the terrain to anticipate where a kill zone can be established. I position troops to cover the openings in the walls where I will get to fire first. I also put foxholes and trenches on the far side of buildings as supplemental positions for my men to retreat when they are going to be overwhelmed by enemy fire. Again, when positioning my infantry platoons, I take care to ensure that all the teams are in communication with their platoon leader, even if it means I cannot cover as wide an area as I would like. This tends to make the platoon defensive positions more compact, taking on the characteristics of a strong point. Despite the need to keep the platoon's units within communication range of the leader, I break them down into teams and spread them out to help protect them from enemy indirect fire. I put the Panzerschreck teams behind the infantry to protect them from the advancing British infantry. I can always move them forward to get good shots at the advancing British armor once the battle begins. After my main units are set up, I place my sniper and recon teams to ensure that I have all areas of the battlefield under observation. I don't have enough men for company reserve. Instead, I place the 2nd platoon on my left, a little back from the front of the town, so they are better able to maneuver in case there is an opportunity to counterattack. Lastly, I position my target reference points. These are critical to the effective use of my indirect fire assets. They significantly improve the response time and accuracy of my mortars. I place them near road junctions and around the perimeter of my defense where I don't have good observation from my spotter in the church tower. This way, other officers can quickly call for fire on those points if the enemy threatens my flanks. Now that my forces are positioned, I check my unit's field of fire and observation by moving the camera down to eye level and panning across the battlefield. When I am satisfied with the position of all my units, I will give them all the hide command to make sure that none of them will prematurely reveal their positions by firing before I am ready to engage. Now I am ready for the enemy. Though this video takes only a few minutes for you to watch, this process took me 3 hours. Now we will see how the defense holds up under attack. In the first 10 minutes of the battle, the British hit the town with a bombardment of heavy guns. Fortunately, having dispersed my units into teams keeps me from suffering many casualties from the heavy bombardment. As the bombardment ends, we spot the first British tanks, followed by Bren carriers. A couple minutes later, my recon team makes contact with British infantry. After a sharp firefight, the recon team in the farmhouse is wiped out.
Feindliche Infanterie gesichtet. Zieht euch zurück!
Using a TRP, I call for fire, using a slow harassing fire to slow the enemy's advance. The British tanks moving down the roads begin to hit the anti-tank mines. My plan to deny the enemy the use of roads is working. Over the next few minutes, my outpost line continues to spot advancing British tanks while moving back into safer positions where they can continue to observe the enemy. The axis of the British advance is revealed as they hit my outpost line. Gradually, the British apply more pressure to my outpost line. As the British armor advances, they suppress my outpost positions with cannon fire, destroying some of them. I continue to harass them with mortar fire, using target reference points to call for fire, in an effort to separate the British infantry from the British armor. This allows my tank hunter teams to ambush the enemy armor and then escape. I am reinforced by an assault gun. The assault gun takes a position where they can ambush the British tanks that are now pressing forward through the open ground. It is important that armor without turrets, such as assault guns, fight from a stationary position against enemy tanks, where they cannot react quickly in a fluid situation. The British tanks are supported by infantry. Once they are close enough, I unhide my machine gun positions and fire on them to suppress them and make them go to ground. I combine the machine gun fire with a mortar barrage. The purpose of this fire is to separate the British infantry from the tanks. This prevents the enemy from effectively using them as a combined arms team and makes them more vulnerable.
Right, let's get out of here.
The battle rages, with the British tanks firing on the church to destroy my machine guns. When a machine gun team is under tank fire, I immediately abandon that position. There's no point in staying in a position that's going to be destroyed by superior enemy firepower. Despite one machine gun section retreating, the machine gun fire from several other positions, combined with the mortar fire, stops the British infantry attack. I'm able to launch a counterattack with my 2nd platoon on the left. The platoon attacks the pinned British infantry's flank, routing them. Without infantry to protect the British tanks, I can infiltrate anti-tank teams to their flanks and destroy them. According to plan, I'm able to have an anti-tank team crawl forward and destroy a British tank now that the infantry are no longer around it. Once again, the British bombard the town in preparation for an assault down the road on the right. As anticipated, the British tanks come down the road, led by Bren carriers. Their engineers attempt to clear an obstacle with demolitions, but are cut down. My assault gun is well positioned to knock out the British armor, and the attack is stopped short of the town. My careful preparations have paid off. The defense has held. Time and again, we surprised the enemy in prepared kill zones, gained local fire superiority, and destroyed them. The cumulative effect was to sap their strength and thus stop the attack. Until next time, this is Jeffrey Paulding for Armchair General, signing off.